Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahilladzi arsala rasulahu bil huda wa dinil haqq liyudhhirahu 'ala ad-dini kullihi walau karihal musyrikun. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarika lahu wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma shalli wa sallim wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Inshallah, in this occasion, 6:37. Inshallah, I'll do a quick tadabbur about one of the surah that I think I read the most when I did the prayer, which is Surah Al-Muzammil. It's quite a long surah, so I'm just going to be quick. Surah Al-Muzammil, which means the covered one, or the enfolded one, or the shrouded one. So, Surah Al-Muzammil, Ya Ayyuhal Muzammil, that's the surah that I'm talking about. First, let's see the asbab al-nuzul, the reason of the revelation. There's two main reports about why and when this surah was revealed. The first opinion is when the Prophet ﷺ heard about the meeting of the Quraysh and their strategy in order to overcome the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. So after hearing that, the Prophet ﷺ was distressed, so he wrapped himself in his clothes, covered himself, and went to sleep. So that's the first report, the first opinion. And the second opinion was that the surah was revealed. This is one of the earliest surah that was revealed. So the second opinion says that the surah revealed right after the first revelation, which is Ikram. So after the meeting with Jibril for the first time in the cave Hira, the Prophet went home and then asked his wife Khadijah to cover him with blankets and try to overwhelm of the message and then try to get to sleep. So that's where the word cover, the covered one, Al-Muzammil. So let's just write in to the first ayah, Ya Ayyuhal Muzammil, O you the covered one. Allah says, Qumil layl, stand in prayer at night, illa qalila, but a small part of it, which means only sleep at a small part of it, and for the rest of the night, qumil layl, stand in prayer. Then nisfahu, or half of the night. So sleep for the other half, but stand up and pray for the other half. Aw inqus minhu qalila, aw zid alayhi, or more or less of half of the night. So these ayats, this sequence also suggested that Qiyamul Layl, standing in prayer at night, was wajib, was an obligation for the Prophet ﷺ, and what was followed by the companions around him at the time. So Qiyamul Layl was wajib, an obligation. Why? And also before that, warattilil Qur'ana tartila, and Allah says, and then recite the Quran with tartil, calmly. And the reason why the Qiyamul Layl and also reciting Quran was wajib at night at the time was because the next ayah, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila, because we shall bestow on you a weighty message, a heavy message, because we will give you, because you will carry on this heavy message. Then we make Qiyamul Layl an obligation for you to prepare you. And what is meant by heavy message is not, when we mention like I just read a heavy book, what comes to mind is that this book is heavy in terms of wordings, in terms of the phrases, because it's difficult to understand. That's what we mean by when we say a heavy book. But that is not the case. What is meant by weighty or heavy message that Allah gives the Prophet is not the wording, because the Quran is easy to understand in terms of wordings, phrases, but it's the significance. The significance of the Quran, of the Sharia, of the Deen is very heavy. That's why it needs some preparation. In order to carry something heavy, then we need a strong shoulders. We need some preparation to strengthen our shoulders. So that is Qiyamul Layl was to the Prophet and to the companions, because they will carry something big, something heavy in terms of the importance and significance. So they need strong shoulders. So they need to prepare themselves, and that is Qiyamul Layl. That's why that's an obligation. Inna nashi'atal layli ashaddu wata'awwa qila. Verily, rising at night is better for understanding and more suitable for recitation. Inna laka fin nahari sabahan tawila. During the day, you have a long chain of things to attend to. So this is Allah saying that the night time is the best situation, the best time to understand the Quran. It's going to be easier for us to understand the Quran and to connect to Allah directly. Because Allah says, in the daytime we have a lot of things, we have a lot of work, so it might be difficult to concentrate. But at night, when everyone is asleep, there's no more WhatsApp notifications or everything. We can just focus to Allah, read the Quran, try to understand the Quran, try to pray, and try to do tadabbur while reciting the Quran. So that's why Quran is meant to be understood, not just to be memorized. So we have to also try to understand what we memorize from the Quran. So we can really connect, or we can really try to understand. When we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, we really in our mind, our heart, that all praises Lillahi, only for Allah, Rabbul Alameen, the Rabb of the Alameen. So we can really feel. And that would be the time that is most effective to do so is at night. Ayah 8. وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا. Therefore, remember your Lord's name and devote yourself wholeheartedly to Him. So also, اذكر His names at night. رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ فَاتَّخِذْهُ وَكِيلًا. He is the Lord of the East and the West. There is no deity other than Him. Take Him for your guardian. And then the next ayah, فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ وَاهْجُرْهُمْ هَجْرًا جَمِيلًا. So that's why this is why the first reason of revelation, because at the time the Quraysh, the people of Quraysh, the disbelievers tried to harm. They tried to harm the Muslims, the companions and the Prophet, with their words and their actions. So Allah says, "Fasbir, be patient, ala ma yaqulun, for what they say, wahjurhum hajran jamila, and leave their company with noble dignity." So at the time, Allah said to the Prophet and to the Muslims, don't engage, just leave them, right? Don't deal with them. وَذَرْنِي وَالْمُكَذِّبِينَ أُولِي النَّعْمَةِ وَمَهِّلْهُمْ قَلِيلًا. Leave them to me, Allah says, those who deny the truth and enjoy the comforts of this life. Bear with them for a little while. So at that stage, Allah said to the Muslims, the Prophet, do not engage, do not deal with them, just leave them be and leave them to me. So Allah Himself will deal with the mukathibin, with the mushrikeen. And Allah says, Inna ladayna ankala wa jahima. We have heavy chains and blazing fire. Wa ta'aman dha ghussatin wa adaban alima. Food that chokes and painful suffering. Yawma tarjuful ardu wal jibalu wa kanatil jibalu kathiban mahila. On the day when the earth and the mountains will shake and the mountains will crumble into heaps of shifting sand. Now, very quickly, to understand the Sharia, we can't just take lesson from one or two verses. We have to compile all verses, all hadith regarding an issue. So, in terms of dealing with the enemy of Islam, these verses say that do not engage with them, just be patient and don't do anything to them. Just leave that to Allah. But we also have to remember the context. The surah revealed the Muslims were the minority, right? The Muslims, they had no power. So there's really not much they could do. That's why Allah said, leave them to be. But there are verses when Allah says, retaliate. When Allah says, don't just be quiet, don't just stop yourself. You can stop them. You can do your strength. That is when, especially when the Muslims were stronger in Medina, right? So we can't really do any, just not to misunderstand the ayah. So then, whatever happens, whatever context we are in, we can't retaliate. We can't stop them with our strength. But if we are in the context as they were, when they had no power, when they are the minority, maybe that's the best thing to do. Inna arsalna ilaikum rasulan shahidan alaikum kama arsalna ila fir'auna rasulan. Indeed, we have sent you a messenger to be your witness, just as we sent a messenger to Fir'aun. Fa'asa Fir'aunur Rasul fa'akhadnahu akhdan wabila. But Fir'aun disobeyed the messenger, so we inflicted on him a severe punishment. So Allah gives an example, because Allah talks about the Quraysh, right? So Allah gives an example Allah mentions the name of Fir'aun. And look at what happened to Fir'aun. Look what Allah said, what I did to Fir'aun. Allah gave Fir'aun severe punishment in the end of his life. Now, Fir'aun, why Allah mentioned Fir'aun? Because Fir'aun was probably one of the strongest person in history in terms of wealth, in terms of army, right? In terms of power. But look at what happened to Fir'aun. So Allah, as if Allah says that, compare yourself to Fir'aun. You are nothing in comparison to Fir'aun. You have no wealth, you have no power. Even if you have, it's nothing compared to the power of Fir'aun. But look what happened to him. Now, how dare you have the audacity to disobey the Prophet? Right? Are you stronger than Fir'aun? فَكَيْفَ تَتَّقُونَ إِن كَفَرْتُمْ يَوْمًا يَجْعَلُ الْوِلْدَانَ شِيبًا. How will you, if you continue to disbelieve, guard yourself against a day that will turn children's hair to gray? So how can you, if you continue doing this, if you continue disobeying the Prophet, what have you prepared for the day of judgment? As-samā'u munfatirun bih kana wa'duhu maf'ūlan. That is the day when the sky shall be rent asunder, the skies will be torn apart. God's promise will certainly be fulfilled. And Allah closes the reminders, the series of reminders, with inna hadihi tadzkirah. Surely this is a reminder. فَمَنْ شَاءَ اتَّخَذَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِ سَبِيلًا. So that whoever will take the right way to their Lord. Now the last ayah. It is half of the page ayah. But this last ayah was revealed around 1 year after the first 19 ayats. Because there's 20 ayats. So this is revealed not, so there's time. And the last ayah changes the law. When we established that Qiyamul Layl was an obligation, now, a year after that first revelation, came the next revelation to change the rule that now Qiyamul Layl is not an obligation anymore, it is a voluntary, it is just sunnah. So Allah says, I just read the translation. Surely your Lord knows that you, O Muhammad, stand in prayer for nearly 2/3 of the night, or sometimes half of it, or a third, as do some of those with you. Allah alone keeps a precise measure of the day and night. He knows that you believers are unable to endure this and has turned to you in mercy. So recite in prayer whatever you can from the Quran. He knows that some of you will be sick, some of you will be traveling throughout the land seeking Allah's bounty, and some of you fighting in the cause of Allah. So recite whatever you can from it, and continue to perform regular prayers, pay alms, tax, pay zakah, and lend to Allah a good loan. Whatever good you send for yourself, you will find it with Allah far better and more rewarding. And seek Allah's forgiveness. Surely Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. So Allah says, Allah knows that you won't be able to do that. It's difficult. That's the essence of it. So فَقْرَؤُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. So read from Quran what's easy for you. You don't have to stand in prayer and read like even Surah Al-Muzammil or Surah Al-Baqarah. Just read whatever easy for you. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ. Even just 2 rak'ah before adhan of subh, do it. And Allah says, why? Because alima sayakunu minkum marad. Allah knows that some of you will be sick. Allah says some of you will be traveling to work, basically. Yabatabuna min fadlillah, seeking the bounty of Allah, seeking the blessings of Allah, seeking the rizq, working for a living. And some of you will be fighting in jihad fi sabilillah. So that's why. So that's the end of the surah. Just one more thing that I want to mention is that Allah mentions working for a living, traveling, seeking the bounty of Allah as one of the reasons why we don't have to do Qiyamul Layl. Why Qiyamul Layl is not an obligation anymore. So that's to show the importance and how noble it is for us Muslims, especially us men, to work for a living. There's a lot of hadith that mentions the virtues, the fadilah, the virtues of working with our hands and feeding our family. And unfortunately, sometimes there are men who forget about that. I mean, they don't really work hard for their family, even though in Islam, there's important. And how important that is, Allah mentions that as one of the reasons why Qiyamul Layl was not wajib anymore. So, even though it's not wajib, of course the Prophet ﷺ and his greatest companions kept doing it. Because as Allah mentioned in the first stage of the surah, that we need that. If we want to follow his footsteps, if we really want to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ, to do da'wah, to invite people to the truth, to call people to the truth, then we are carrying a heavy message. And how can we do that if we don't have strong shoulders? And how do we strengthen our shoulders? By doing Qiyamul Layl, inshallah. Because if we can fight against the urge to sleep, if we can fight against our own desire, inshallah, everything else will be easy. That's why Qiyamul Layl is very significant. And this is a nasihat, this is an advice for me personally and all of us generally. Wallahu a'lam bishawab. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jazakallah.
Subhanallah wa bihamdihi.